Alright, so I kind of wanted to. This is like my third time recording this, and it's gonna get annoying. But today we're gonna talk a bit about this last video, not the last video I made, but a video I made called Red Hat has never really been open source. And a lot of people misconstrued my argument because they assumed what I was going to say was that because they don't distribute the source code freely, that it's not open source. That isn't what I was saying. However, there is validity to that argument, and I personally think that it's not in the spirit of open source. But we can have a separate discussion about that because what I did say, which is what the topic of this video is I wanted to go deeper into this. Is Red Hat connects to what's called software as a service, where they have an open source client, but their backend is closed source, and this is unlike their Flatpak implementation, which is open. But if you connect your Red Hat Enterprise Linux to their services, you don't know what code they're running on their system, and for these components of the operating system that use software as a service, such as their licensing, where if they made their licensing open source, it'd be way too easy to crack. What would be the point? But I said though, if you strip out all of the Red Hat from Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and honestly, you'd have to remove the licensing too to make it completely Libre. You would have to like remove any Red Hat imagery, or like branding or whatever. But the less extreme, not quite Libre version would be not running software as a service, which means you would be left with CentOS Stream, but it wouldn't be upstream. I mean, you could do that if you wanted to. So, we're gonna make that same argument for this thing called Language Tool, where Language Tool is a free add-on for Firefox, and you can see their GitHub on the left, but on the right is their purchasing page. So what they do is they have software as a service that you connect to with this add-on, and you're able to pay for more functionality. The payment isn't what I have a problem with because there's very few examples I can think of, except like GreyJ, that has a completely open source application and lets you strip out the payment model. But if you yeah, that just lets you completely strip it out if you wanted to. But they do have a way to pay for it, which I would recommend just because I I even wouldn't be opposed to a subscription because you're paying for continued updates. So $10 once, I bought it. I'm not gonna buy it again. So but I'm still expecting updates in perpetuity. So that's kind of a risky business model, but they do have that option. Now, software as a service, meanwhile, and actually, GreyJ would be an example of using software as a service because that licensing doesn't unlock certain features in the application. But whatever. It connects to their own backend, but I don't know if it's open or not, honestly, and it's not really relevant. But the Language Tool is an example, and there are multiple applications that are like this, where the application itself is open source, but they restrict functionality behind software as a service. And this is where the AGPL versus the GPL comes in, because the GPL, this language tool, for example, is licensed under LGPL. So AGPL, however, would say that this is not compliant if it were licensed that way because the backend would also have to be open source. And that's kind of as we run more and more services on our computer, as we connect to more and more people's servers, basically, uh, we have this problem where we're using open source applications that aren't really open source, So we can improve on the client, but can we improve on the server? Can we improve on the service? No. And that's something to think about when you're thinking about open source is, do we call it an open source program if it's connecting to a closed source service? Personally, I would say no. I would say that the AGPL is much more in the spirit of open source than the GPL is. But yeah, it's just something to think about when you're installing software. Is your software really open source, or is it just open source in name? And I don't know. That's really all I had. Thanks.